On February 19, a US Air Force F-16 from the 421st Fighter Squadron was providing air cover for a US naval task force cruising along the coast of Yemen. While the patrol had been relatively uneventful thus far, everything changed in a matter of seconds. The Houthis, an Iranian-backed militia group occupying a large portion of Yemen, fired a surface-to-air missile at the jet, the first time they've done so since the escalation of the conflict between Israel and Hamas in 2023. According to the official report, the attack failed to reach the target, or more simply stated, missed. Even worse, the Houthis attacked another US asset with a missile, adding to the aggression. But there's likely far more behind the surface than the word miss implies. Let's create a hypothetical that involves one of the most common options available to the Houthis and the known defensive measures that an F-16 might have to unravel the exact sequence of events after the missile was fired. First, let's begin with the details of the missile used in the attack. The Iranian-backed militia group gets pretty much all of its weapons from Iran, which in turn has received a lot of its arsenal from Russia. More precisely, Russia typically exports Soviet-era weapons or systems and their immediate upgrades to its military partners. One of the most likely SAMs that could be used against an F-16 or even a drone, which we'll get to later, is the SA-6 or 2K-12 Cub, a view backed by the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Given the geographical distribution of the Houthis across the third of Yemen, a battery could have feasibly lay in wait until it detected a large enough target, like an F-16. The SA-6 system uses a 1S91 radar, which can detect and lock onto a fighter jet from around 42 miles away. The battery would then wait until the jet approached nearer and launched an SA-6 missile, which has a 14-mile effective range and is capable of reaching speeds up to Mach 2.8, around 2,135 miles per hour or 3,135 feet per second. If the missile was fired from its maximum range and reached its highest speed in negligible time, the pilot would have around 27 seconds to react to the new projectile coming their way. Fortunately, the F-16 was equipped with an array of electronic countermeasures that turned what could have been a deadly missile into a manageable threat. On the aircraft's nose is an AN/APG-83 radar, the first line of defense against the missile. The APG-83 has a detection radius of up to 230 miles, meaning that it can theoretically spot a missile being launched from far beyond its maximum effective range. Unfortunately, this is complicated by the fact that a ground-to-air missile has a much smaller radar cross-section before it reaches its optimal flight speed and altitude, which doesn't happen until roughly halfway through its trajectory. Therefore, the more likely distance at which the APG-83 radar can actually detect the missile is only 6 to 10 miles. This lowers the aforementioned reaction time estimate down to less than 10 seconds, in the worst case. As a result, the pilot would need to initiate a steep dive, drastically reducing the jet's altitude in moments. This maneuver likely aimed to break the missile's fire control lock, since SA-6 is a semi-active radar homing missile. As such, Houthi ground-based radars must maintain a lock on the aircraft to guide the missile throughout its flight path. Once the SA-6 gets close enough, its internal seeker activates for the final few seconds of flight. The rapid drop means that the fighter jet suddenly goes out of the maximum angular velocity of the missile's detection system. Without that target, the missile will lose most of its effectiveness. This comes from the inherent weakness of the semi-active radar homing. The SA-6 relies on continuous radar illumination from a ground-based radar, e.g. the straight flush radar, to guide it to the target, which in turn relies on the radar continuously pointing a beam of energy to it. The missile's onboard seeker homes in on the energy reflected off the target, but it can never independently track targets like modern active seekers. If a target, such as the F-16 in question, breaks the radar lock and the missile loses its guidance signal, a few things can happen. The missile may veer off course, following a preset inertial path if such programming exists, or simply continue past the target and self-destruct after failing to make contact. While it might still turn in a broad arc based on its last known trajectory or program logic, it's incapable of executing sharp, intelligent, or reactive maneuvers without continuous radar input, since it has no way of communicating back. In any case, the missile would become largely useless without an active radar to navigate it or when faced against a rapidly descending target. Despite the steep dive, this might not be enough to fully evade the threat. These aggressive, erratic turns would wreak havoc on the radar's ability to track targets. In this case, we're now referring to the F-16's radar system, which, while capable of tracking up to 20 targets simultaneously, suffers a sharp drop in effectiveness at angles 60 degrees off bore sight, where efficiency can fall below 50%. With a pilot making unpredictable moves, the F-16 could be effectively blind to incoming missiles. Evasive maneuvers are often used alongside countermeasures like chaff and flares to fool anti-air defense systems such as the SA-6, but they're far from a guaranteed escape. In the worst case scenario, the pilot's true last resort is the ejection seat. Mounted on each wing pylon is the Terma Pylon Integrated Dispensing System, or PIDS. Each unit weighs approximately 19 kilograms and reduces the aircraft payload capacity by about 3%. However, this trade-off is well worth the added protection. These pylons can be equipped with additional components of the aircraft's missile warning suite, such as the Hensoldt AAR-60V2 ultraviolet sensors. The sensors, when distributed across the airframe, provide near 360-degree coverage capable of detecting missile launches up to 6 miles away. Upon detecting the SA-6 missiles, the system can deploy 12 MJU 50B infrared flares and 24 RR-180 radar-reflecting chaff bundles. In an ideal scenario, this creates a dispersed cloud of thermal and radar signatures designed to confuse enemy tracking systems within a few hundred meters of the aircraft. However, because the SA-6 relies on semi-active radar homing, the flares would be largely ineffective. The chaff bundles would be the primary way to disrupt the missile's radar lock, as they would absorb and reflect the waves emitted from the radar and make the target appear larger than it is. This would force the guidance system operator to guess as to the target's actual location, which can diminish the overall accuracy. As a final defensive measure, the pilot likely also activated the AN/ALQ-184 electronic countermeasures pod located beneath the aircraft. This advanced jamming system is capable of disrupting enemy radar, operating across a 2 to 20 GHz frequency range by using digital radio frequency memory technology. Once engaged, the pod could have jammed the Houthi-fired control radar's tracking signal, degrading the missile's guidance capability. The SA-6 missile likely lost its radar lock and veered off course. But the Houthis weren't done yet. On the same day, a US MQ-9 Reaper drone was flying a routine reconnaissance mission about 50 miles northeast of Hodeidah. Based on the position of the drone against the largest cities in Yemen, it was likely tracking Houthi-supplied convoys reinforcing enemy positions. Frustrated by their earlier failure, Houthi gunners tried again, likely firing another SA-6 or a slightly modified SA-8. Although the MQ-9 is less advanced than a manned fighter like the F-16, it's still equipped with a robust suite of defensive systems. Its AN/AAR-47 missile warning system would detect the incoming launch in under a second. In response, the drone could climb above 15,000 feet to keep the incoming missiles out of its lowest sensor blind spots, specifically the 30-degree cutouts beneath the aircraft's horizon. Simultaneously, it would activate the AN/ALE-47 countermeasure dispenser, releasing flares and chaff to disrupt the radar's tracking. The Reaper can deploy 8 MJU 60B infrared flares over 4 seconds, producing intense thermal signatures designed to mislead infrared seekers. Alongside these, radar-reflecting RR-180 chaff bundles can confuse radar-guided threats. While these countermeasures are effective, their availability is limited. The Reaper carries a maximum of 60 flares and 120 chaff bundles, enough for roughly 12 defensive engagements. Once 75% of this inventory is expended, the drone must abort its mission and return to base. Decision-making during such encounters is further supported by the ALR-69 radar warning receiver, which monitors radar activity across a 0.5 to 20 GHz frequency range. Under optimal conditions, it can detect and localize enemy radar emissions, such as those from the SA-6 fire control systems, up to 200 kilometers away with azimuth accuracy within 1 degree. This rapid situational awareness allows the drone to respond within just a couple of seconds after a threat is identified. As mentioned, these attacks were far from routine. This was the first time the Houthis had ever fired on a manned US aircraft, a significant escalation in the conflict. Before that, the Houthis claimed they downed at least 14 MQ-9 drones, a number the US government itself disputes. With the Houthis shooting at US drones since 2017, it was practically a matter of time before they got bold enough to go after more defensible targets. It would also be a matter of time before the US responded in kind. Unlike with the previous administration of former President Joe Biden, current President Donald Trump has taken a much more active approach to trying to root out the Houthis as well as other Iranian-backed proxies around Israel. One of the most likely responses would be to use a guided missile destroyer, potential candidates being ships already stationed in the region as part of the US naval presence. While the USS Stockdale was in San Diego on February 21, making it an unlikely participant, other Arleigh Burke-class destroyers could have been in range. Some earlier reports speculated that the USS Spruance might have been involved, but records show it had returned to San Diego in December 2024. That said, another vessel already deployed in the Red Sea at the time likely carried out the operation. Once in position, the ship's crew would have received encrypted launch instructions from Central Command. While a Tomahawk cruise missile strike might have been the expected option, the Navy may have chosen a more calculated and symbolic weapon, the SM-6. Every Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, which constitutes all but 3 of America's guided missile destroyers, carries a versatile mix of missiles in its vertical launch system. Tomahawks for the long-range strike, SM-2s for area air defense, Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles or ESMs for point defense, anti-submarine rockets, SM-6 for long-range interception, and SM-3s for ballistic missile defense on BMD-capable ships. This party mix of missiles equips each destroyer with the ability to respond to threats across multiple domains. The selection of the SM-6 in this instance would have been a deliberate and symbolic move. The SM-6 is one of the most advanced interceptors in the Navy's arsenal, typically reserved for high-speed airborne threats. With a speed exceeding Mach 3.5 and equipped with a 64 kg or 140 pound fragmentation warhead, it was originally developed for long-range air defense. However, the SM-6 has since been adapted for limited anti-surface and ground strike roles. Although the Tomahawk boasts a much longer range, around 1,500 miles, the SM-6 speed makes it exceptionally hard to intercept. In scenarios where targets are mobile and time sensitive, its agility and rapid time to target serve as a valuable capability. The battery or batteries that shot the SA-6 missiles would have likely started retreating as soon as they could confirm they missed the target. Satellite imagery could have indicated that the SA-6 launcher and its IS-91 radar were still active near Hodeidah. And with a top road speed of roughly 31 miles per hour, the mobile launcher could have only moved several dozen miles by the time targeting was confirmed. Rapid response was essential to prevent it from escaping or being concealed. Upon receiving strike authorization from CENTCOM, the crew aboard USS Spruance pushed to top speed and maneuvered into firing position in the southern Red Sea. The strike team quickly prepared a flight path, taking into account air defenses and optimal attacking angles. Instead of programming a straight line trajectory, they would have established a network of waypoints to reduce predictability. Once the missile reached its pre-planned staging point, onboard guidance systems took over to finalize targeting. An SM-6 missile launched from the Spruance, traveling at supersonic speeds, would cover approximately 200 miles in under 6 minutes. Despite the Houthis' growing air defense capabilities, their systems are far behind the curve when it comes to defending against US weaponry. The SM-6 could simply glide in and obliterate the SA-6 launcher. This sequence of events would showcase just how quickly the US could muster a devastating response to blatant aggression in the Middle East, potentially removing a vital piece of Houthi equipment in the process. Of course, as we all know by now, the US didn't respond militarily on February 19 or February 20. While the attack was a provocation unseen in the last few years of the conflict, the Trump administration waited for a bit before moving into position. The US would wait until March 15 to start the retaliation, and then the gloves came off. The US launched a massive strike campaign deep into the Houthi-held territory, and it wasn't just symbolic, it was surgical. The The US conducted nearly daily airstrikes and naval missile launches that hammered key military facilities across Sana'a, Sadr, and other operational hotspots. And this wasn't just about blowing up weapons, it was about breaking the Houthis' backbone. Their radar networks, launch sites, air defense systems, and even power stations were all hit. Even Houthi officials admitted the scale of the damage. Over 50 people were killed and nearly 100 injured in just the first wave. US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz didn't mince words either. He told reporters, "We eliminated several high-value targets, including a chief missile coordinator, though intel confirmation is still catching up." And the hits kept coming. Just 2 weeks later, another round of US strikes reportedly targeted a Houthi command post in Sana'a, killing at least one person. In typical fashion, the Houthis followed up by claiming they had shot down a Reaper drone over Marib 2 days later. But the message had already been sent. The US isn't just playing defense anymore, it's going on offense. Here's the bigger picture though. This isn't just about the Houthis. The Houthis are a proxy. They're the long arm of Iran, used to poke and prod, while Tehran plays the plausible deniability game. By hitting the Houthis this hard and this fast, the US was also putting Iran on notice. And it's not just Washington. Israel is right there too, watching the region like a hawk. Both the US and Israel have made it crystal clear they're not going to sit around while Iran keeps inching closer to nuclear capability. And that's exactly where this is going. Every missile that lands in Yemen, every radar site that gets flattened is a warning to Tehran. As one defense official said off the record, "We're sending a message. If you think we won't cross the line when it counts, look at Yemen." It's no coincidence this campaign ramped up just as Iran's nuclear enrichment hits new highs. The US isn't just targeting missiles on launchers, it's targeting the chain of influence, and the message is loud and clear. Support terror, threaten global trade, or build nukes, and you'll get a response. Even President Trump chimed in, saying, "We've severely weakened the Houthis, but the real pain is yet to come if the message isn't heard." And while there are critics raising flags about humanitarian fallout, the Houthis have already weaponized civilian areas and made targeting decisions hard on purpose. That's not new, and it doesn't change the fact that these strikes are about dismantling a terrorist network propped up by Iran. But why is Iran suddenly in the spotlight again? Let's go back a bit. Iran has long insisted it would never pursue nuclear weapons. For years, through UN speeches, media appearances, and high-stakes negotiations, Tehran has pushed the line that its nuclear program is strictly peaceful. That was the foundation of the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the JCPOA, better known as the Iran Nuclear Deal. In that agreement, Iran pledged to cap uranium enrichment, dismantle critical infrastructure, and accept round-the-clock inspections in exchange for sanctions relief. But fast forward to early 2025 and the situation tells a completely different story. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, and multiple independent analysts, Iran is now sitting on enough enriched uranium, some of it near weapons-grade levels, to produce multiple nuclear warheads. And we're not talking about hypotheticals. Experts now estimate Iran could enrich to 90% purity, weapons grade, in a matter of days and potentially assemble a crude nuclear device within 6 months. That's a far cry from the peaceful energy program they've long claimed to pursue. To make matters worse, Iran has significantly restricted the international oversight. In 2023 and 2024, it began blocking IAEA inspectors, turning off surveillance cameras at enrichment sites, and withholding data. As one former IAEA official put it, "You can't verify what you can't see." So what changed? Much of this backslide started after the US withdrawal from the JCPOA in 2018. But rather than return to compliance or renegotiate in good faith, Iran used the window to quietly rebuild its capabilities, installing advanced centrifuges, enriching at higher purity, and now operating with what analysts call nuclear breakout potential. And this progression flatly contradicts Iran's repeated claim that it does not seek nuclear weapons. If that were truly the case, why is it? Enriching uranium far beyond energy-grade needs, installing advanced centrifuges used in nuclear enrichment, cutting off access to inspectors. The logic doesn't hold. You don't build a racetrack, build a car and fill it with fuel just to say, "We never plan to drive." Even US officials are publicly acknowledging this shift. A recent Pentagon intelligence assessment stated that Iran is no longer operating within the framework of peaceful intent. This is further complicated by Iran using both covert and open avenues of attack against Israel. On one hand, the country has practically single-handedly supported various military factions in countries bordering Israel for decades. All Iran had to do was stoke the flames and wait for the perfect opportunity to strike, which happened with the escalation of the Israel-Hamas conflict in late 2023, which was partially Iran's doing as well, since Hamas is another one of Iran's proxies. Then Iran actually started throwing its own missiles into the ring. While the Israel anti-air defenses held against the attempts, it was another escalation of the conflict, which only dragged the US into the mix. It then started arming the proxies at an accelerated rate, with the Houthis becoming bolder and more aggressive in the process. The combination of Iran's nuclear advancement and its use of proxy forces has prompted significant international concern. Trump has issued ultimatums threatening severe action if Iran does not engage in nuclear negotiations. And the strikes on the Houthis are likely going to be just the start of these extreme measures. Similarly, Israel maintains that all options, including diplomacy and military action, are on the table to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear-armed state. Conversely, nations like Russia have condemned threats of military action against Iran, warning of potentially catastrophic consequences and advocating for diplomatic solutions. The situation is further complicated by the volatile relationship between Russia and the US. Technically speaking, the two sides are on the opposite sides of the relatively new bipolar world order, with the US and NATO on one side and China and Russia on the other. However, Trump had started focusing more on trying to grow the US economy internally, with very mixed results and reactions from the global community. These attempts also leaked into the ongoing war in Ukraine, as Trump had berated Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for refusing to sign a ceasefire agreement. When Ukraine did accept a partial ceasefire, Putin ended up breaking it anyway. In the end, the Houthis might just end up as a bookmark in history. If Trump manages to exert enough pressure on the group, it could lose momentum and give up in its attempts to aggravate the US and Israel further. And even if they do, their most recent attempts to damage the US fleet have not gone so well. So what do you think? How will Trump's campaign against the Houthis end? Let us know in the comments below, and thanks for watching. And remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more of the latest developments in the Middle East, Ukraine, and other military affairs around the globe. Now, go check out F-16s are doing the unthinkable in Ukraine, even US pilots are stunned. Or click this other video instead.